Today, Saturday, July the 30th, 1983, the first day of the special two-day event organised by the Northwest Schoolboys Motorcycle Club. And what a day it is. Although the rain moved in on the Sunday, the weather couldn't have been finer as more than 350 riders, gathered from 7 countries, get themselves ready for the 2 days of punishment they and their machines are about to endure. This international event celebrates the 10th anniversary of the Northwest Schoolboys Motorcycle Club. And this year, a strong challenge is being made by the American team and their Kawasaki machines. Before machines are allowed on the course, there are certain formalities to be attended to, and one of these is scrutineering. Bikes and helmets are checked out by course scrutineers to ensure not only that they conform to the regulations, but also that they're safe. And on this point, the scrutineer's word is final.
Please. Either wire it up or take it off completely.
Two Suzuki machines being given a thorough checkout. Senior expert Tim Cannons, and this machine belonging to senior rider Nick Leach.
A few weeks ago, where one chap, a road racer, his helmet come flying straight off his head.
What was his head like?
Well, you just, I mean, some of these helmets, with the big funds like that, you get them on your head like that, and they can float straight off even when they fasten.
Yeah.
The meeting attracted a sizable entry from our Dutch friends. Almost 50 riders had come over to take part. And the event was marked by a visit by Mr. Easterman, special emissary from the Dutch Embassy in London.
And give them a big applause, they did the best so very well.
He and other dignitaries present chatted not only with the young riders from his own homeland, but also with those from other countries represented at the meeting.
CC, is it? Good, so. Just a small translation. He was asking that he is riding 80 cubic Yamaha, so you're all on the line now, are you, Mr. Hazelman? Right, thank you very much.
The Belgium team. The Finnish contingent.
Nothing very severe.
From the United States, Paul Denise, Dick Ballora, Larry Ward, and junior rider Hank Morey. And the British team, led into the arena by junior stars James Dobb, number 64, and number 1, Paul Malin. British rider Helen Bennett chats with Mr. Easterman.
A big round of applause as all the lads will go out of the arena.
There are 4 classes with 3 races to be run in each class: Junior, Inter 80, Inter 100, Senior and Senior Expert. These are the machines they'll be riding and the age group covered by each class. Strong contender in the junior class is 11-year-old Paul Malin from Tilton-on-the-Hill in the Midlands. Paul expects to be sharing the running with his rival James Dobb from Chesterfield, but must also be anticipating a strong challenge from American visitor Hank Morey, cooling off here before the race. The Dutch rider's number 32, Eric van Breugel, and behind him, number 31, Twanny Vullings, with British riders John Thompson and Danny Smith. 12-year-old Patrick van Breugel and Dutch teammate Peter van Hoot. And at the start of this 5-lap race, it's James Dobb and Paul Malin taking an early lead. And my goodness, only seconds into the race, and already one of the riders is in trouble. It looks from here as though he'd had a couple of wheels over his legs. Yet it's Mark Owens from Cheshire. A shaken Mark Owens with, as far as we can see, nothing broken. Out of the race then. A race now on its 2nd lap with Paul Malin in hot pursuit of rival James Dobb still in the lead. Then it's Ben Johansson, Neil Prince and number 15, James Marsh. Down over the lakeside dips and bumps. The American, Hank Morey. In 8th place there, number 60, Paul Coward. Richard Phillips, number 11, also on a Kawasaki. The field will spread out now as the leaders come down over Three Sisters Hill, through Devil's Elbow, on through the Honda Loops and climbing then up to Pilgrim's Leap. And Paul Malin has taken the lead from James Dobb, only seconds between them as they fly over the loop. Neil Prince has moved into 3rd place with Ben Johansson and Paul Coward right behind him. On the ascent past the hay bales, it's still Paul Malin and James Dobb. Coming down now, past the hay bales and into the cliff descent, it's Paul Malin, followed closely by James Dobb. Devil's Elbow, and James Dobb is putting all he's got into this lap, closing the gap now on Paul Malin. Belgian Joel Brixey and Twanny Vullings hard behind, moving up now to challenge Neil Prince and Paul Coward there, number 60. The rest of the field jockeying for the minor positions. Every point counts in an international like this, and every rider is determined to do the best he can for his side. The lakeside bumps now with Malin and Dobb firmly in the lead. And watch those boys fly. Malin and Dobb lapping now, and oh dear, the slower riders come off, taking James Dobb with him. Paul Malin gets away, but James Dobb's going to have to hurry if he wants to keep his 2nd place. Well, that's given Paul Malin a clear lead in this race. Not that James Dobb is hanging about, as determined as ever in this last lap to make as much as he can out of the closing minutes of the race.
And James Dobb losing a lot of ground this time.
Out of the 3 races, these were the final results. The rest of the field clearly outclassed by that battling duo, Malin and Dobb. Very disappointing score for American rider Hank Morey in 7th place. He had to pull out of his second race, so he really didn't have a chance of showing the form he's capable of. Now that you've had a chance to see one of the races, let's take a look at the course itself. The places to look for are the 2 sets of bum holes at the hay bales and the stretch past the lake just before the bend leading to the hay bales. Lots of fun here as well as the riders go flying over the leap. The Inter-80 class sees a strong entry from the Dutch team, Pedro Tractor number 20, and one of the up-and-coming talents of the Netherlands, 13-year-old Harold van Heeswijk. From Norg in Holland, 13-year-old René de Rode riding a Yamaha. No American entry in the Inter-80, but the strongly fancied British rider in this class is Justin Banks. Ready now for the start of this race. Into the lead at the start, the Dutch boys, tightly bunched, with Justin Banks jockeying for position. Past the pool, and René de Rode has moved into an early lead with Justin Banks hard behind. Van Heeswijk and Tractor seconds behind the leaders. And as they move on to the upper loops, tragedy for Warren Edwards, as a collision leaves him pinned under his Kawasaki machine. As with all well-organized motocross events, a medical team is immediately on the spot. And although Warren is now clearly out of the running, at least he's not seriously injured. But the race goes on. Down the cliff descent and on up to Three Sisters Hill, it's René de Rode and Justin Banks making the running in this race.
René de Rode still in front in the Honda. Chased hard now by Justin Banks and his Honda. Tony Bennett and Harold van Heeswijk from the Netherlands.
Coming down now over the lakeside dips and bumps, it's de Rode and Banks. Moving up past the hay bales, and that bum hole catches de Rode out, taking Banks with him. And this is certainly going to make a change in the fight for the lead. De Rode's teammates, Van Heeswijk and Tractor, have now forged ahead, with Sean Charles close behind. Although Banks has now got away, de Rode is having trouble. Yes, de Rode is in difficulty, and he's certainly losing ground in this race. Climbing up to Three Sisters Hill, it's little Harold van Heeswijk. With Kawasaki teammate Pedro Tractor hard on his heels. And Banks is gaining ground now. He's under overtaking Sean Charles, Kawasaki number 11, fighting to get back there among the leaders. The rest of the pack making what they can of the minor positions. Down past the pool again, and it's still Van Heeswijk and Tractor. With Banks battling on to regain the ground he lost at this very spot. And the positions are unchanged as the 2 leaders, on this last lap well ahead of the field, wind their way up over Three Sisters Hill and onto Devil's Elbow. Justin Banks, just too much ground left for him to regain, has to content himself with 3rd place. has Van Heeswijk and Tragter go on to win this particular race. Over the 3 races, however, and with a clear 2 points lead, Banks takes the title in this class. And there's no doubt about it, led by little Harold, the 3 Dutch boys certainly showed the crowd what they can do with the 80cc machine. Our first look at the bigger bikes as we move on to the Inter 100 class. This is a class where British riders are likely to make the running. This is Colin Thomas on his Yamaha. Lee Hemmings from Salisbury is on top form. But the rider he's going to be watching out for is 13-year-old Larry Ward from the United States, looking to prove his worth on this, his first visit over here. British rider Kenny Wyatt and 14-year-old Darren Malin, elder brother of Paul, with Kawasaki teammate and strong contender for the title, Neil Miller. Riding a Yamaha, 14-year-old Jarmo Heljo from Finland. And here we go with the start of this 7-lap Inter 100 race. And right from the off, the American is up there with the leaders, as the pack heads for the bend that takes them down to the lake. There they go, over the bumps and dips and then up to the ascent past the hay bales, making what they can of those notorious bum holes as they sort themselves out on this first lap. And in the lead as they come down from the top loops, it's Lee Hemmings, number 80, with only seconds behind him, the American rider Larry Ward. Down from Three Sisters Hill they go, as the rest of the field, headed by Colin Thomas, their number 54, do what they can to close the gap. There's just one young lady riding in this class, and there she is, 14-year-old Helen Bennett, number 9. Helen Bennett from Tattenhall riding a Yamaha, doing very nicely there in 6th place, as the riders move on round the Honda bends, over Pilgrim's Leap, and on into the next lap. Lee Hemmings still in the lead, with Larry Ward losing a bit of ground at this stage. Darren Malin, number 1 on the Kawasaki, covering our cameraman in dust. The rest of the pack swinging round this first bend, on into the next lap. Neil Miller there, keeping himself within striking distance of the leaders. Helen Bennett and Finnish rider Heljo battling it out on their Yamahas. A spot of trouble there for one of the riders, below the hay bales. Not a good place to be hanging around. Well, he's away again, and no problem for the riders following behind as they swing round on the inside. Down the cliff descent, it's still Hemmings in the lead, catching up with the last man as he moves into Three Sisters Hill, with the American Larry Ward, number 40, closing the gap as they head down to Devil's Elbow. But the leaders aren't having it all their own way. The rest of the field is close behind, just waiting for a chance to take advantage of any mistakes the leaders care to make. Little Kenny Wyatt there, having problems at Devil's Elbow. The other side of the lake now, as the leaders move on up the hay bales ascent. It's still Hemmings on his Kawasaki in the lead, with only seconds behind him the American Larry Ward. These two boys have made the running throughout this race. Neither has made a single mistake, and it's going to take a serious error to change things as this last lap takes the leaders, Lee Hemmings and Larry Ward, down past the hay bales and on into the closing stages of this Inter 100 race. Larry Ward came in a poor 12th in his first race, but then second and first in his next two. Poor Lee Hemmings missed scoring any points in the first race so despite a fine showing in the other two, had to content himself with 4th place. Neil Miller, in overall 2nd place, won his first race and came 10th and 6th in the others. And now we come to the big boys, and boy, they don't come any bigger than this guy. 6'2", 157 pounds, Dick Bellora from the United States. 15 years old, and he's been riding in competition for the last 7 years. Mark Havenham from Rotherham in Yorkshire is also 15, and he's riding a Yamaha. From South Africa, this is Colin Dugmore. As we move up in class, the races get longer, and this senior class with its 125 machines is raced over 8 laps. And they're off, and the American rider Dick Bellora isn't going to think much of that for a getaway. He's going to have to put in some pretty fancy riding if he's planning to come anywhere in this race. Down they go into the first bend. The dips and bumps by the lake now, and my goodness, these guys must have wings. As they storm up past the hay bales, it's Mark Havenham there in the lead, with the South African Colin Dugmore pressing him hard in 2nd place. The rest of the field still tightly bunched at this stage in the race. Here comes the leader now, winding his way through the loops high up on the hillside here at Trentham Gardens. Mark Havenham on his Yamaha. The Kawasaki ridden by the South African Colin Dugmore.
Mark Havenham, then number 52, trying to get away from the track with Colin Dugdale. There now.
Mark Havenham kicking his way through the aptly named Devil's Elbow. Climbing round the Honda loops and on up to Pilgrim's Leap. There he goes now, building up a convincing lead away from Colin Dugmore. They're in 2nd place with Ashley Maguire, Lee Masters and David Denley close behind. Team Green manager Alec Wright here with Kawasaki pro rider Kurt Nichols. They're sure to be worried about the poor start made by their boy Dick Bellora. Dutch rider Tony van Dijk, Jason Rawlings, Wayne Howell and Neville King. The rest of these boys hammering away there over Pilgrim's Leap and on into the next lap. And it's still Havenham in the lead with Dugmore in 2nd place. Down the cliff descent, the leader Mark Havenham really pushing hard. Colin Dugmore close behind, trying to close the gap. Devil's Elbow round the loops, and Havenham roars up to the steep slope leading to Pilgrim's Leap. Colin Dugmore there, number 35. Lee Masters coming up to leap behind him with David Denley, number 1, hard on his tail. And our first sight of the American rider, Dick Bellora. He really must have been shifting. From virtually the back of the pack, he's pulled himself up into 5th place in just 2 laps. God help anyone who got in his way. But it's still Havenham in the lead as we climb up the ascent past the hay bales. Colin Dugmore still there in 2nd place, and now the American is beginning to put the pressure on. Moving up now, he's in 4th place and doesn't look as though he's going to be content with that for very long. Down the descent underneath the cliff, and it's still Havenham beginning to catch up now with the last man. Colin Dugmore, and that must be, yes it is, Dick Bellora is now in 3rd place, and the South African is going to have to watch out. But this senior class race is still being led by 15-year-old Mark Havenham. His Yamaha now taking him on to the next lap. Colin Dugmore is certainly in trouble now with the tall American Dick Bellora breathing down his neck. determined to take away the position Doug Moore has held from the very start of the race. Up past the hay bales, still Mark Havenhand, number 52. Colin Dugmore still hanging in there, with Bellora screaming into the bend, pushing hard, waiting for his moment. The rest of the field making the best of it, and having a few moments of their own as they tear round the lakeside bend. Waiting now for the leaders to come down from the upper loops. And it's Mark Havenhand still in the lead. But the Kawasaki coming up behind is not Colin Dugmore's, no, it's Dick Bellora. Dick Bellora now there in second place. How does this guy do it? There he is, down Three Sisters Hill, absolutely hurtling through Devil's Elbow. On up through the loops and up into the air over Devil's Leap. Colin Dugmore beaten back into third place with Lee Masters and David Denley coming up behind. On the other side of the lake now, and Mark Havenhand is lapping one of the slower riders. Dick Bellora close behind as they climb up past the hay bales. And Alec Wright and Kurt Nichols now much happier with the way things are going for Team Green rider Bellora. Down the cliff descent, Dick Bellora putting on the pressure. But Havenhand is still holding his position as the two riders swing round Devil's Elbow. And on over Pilgrim's Leap into the next lap. The bend now near the lake, and Bellora is really breathing down Havenhand's neck as they climb up the hay bales ascent. And that's the moment Bellora's been waiting for. It's Dick Bellora in the lead now, after that quite audacious pass there. From here, it didn't look as if there was room for him to get through. But there he is, well in the lead now, leaving Mark Havenhand almost standing still. In fact, now as Bellora comes charging down the cliff descent, Havenhand seems to have dropped out of the running. Here comes this lanky American on his Kawasaki machine, tearing round Devil's Elbow. An amazing ride, this, for Bellora. There he goes past the finishing stretch and into the last lap. And look how far ahead he is. David Denley is in second place with Lee Masters third. And there we see Colin Dugmore and the rest of the field reaching the end of their lap. And it's become almost too easy for the American as he storms down the cliff descent. No one else even remotely able to challenge him. Just watch him go. He must know he's home and dry, and yet just see this guy move. He's not letting up until he sees the finishing line. A remarkable race for Bellora then as he takes the checkered flag. And a great disappointment for Mark Havenhand, who just seemed to drop out of sight after Bellora took the lead. In second place there is David Denley from Reading on his Yamaha. And that's how the overall placings finished up, with the American rider winning all three of his races. The only rider over the whole weekend to gain maximum points. David Denley a worthy second, but look at the points difference. And Mark Havenhand, who did so well earlier in the race we've just seen, there in fifth place with only just over half the Americans' final score. And finally we come to the most experienced riders in the senior expert class. But quite frankly, after the sort of show the seniors have just put on for the crowd, they really are going to have to make those bikes move. The same size machines as the seniors 125s, but here the riders are in the 15 to 17 age group. And the best of them must be regarded as the pro riders of tomorrow. And again, there's a strong challenge from the American Team Green. Their rider, 16-year-old Paul Denise, has been riding for more than 10 years. And in fact, won his very first national championship a decade ago, almost to the day. But this is the rider who's going to do all he can to keep Denise in his place. And as far as Mark Banks, number 7, is concerned, that place is as far behind as he can possibly leave him. Brother of Justin Banks, who won the Inter-80 class, and son of a World Championship father, Mark is 16, comes from Cambridge and rides a Honda. Kawasaki rider Barry Johnson. Barry is 17 and lives in the Midlands. A bit of pre-race tension showing there in the American rider. He knows he has to win this race if he intends to take the title. In fact, Banks is ahead of him on points at this stage. We've not seen much of our friends from Denmark until now. This is Klaus van Nielsen and teammate Kjell Hansen. That tension-filled moment as the riders wait for the gate to drop. And they're off. And from the very start, it's going to be a battle between Banks and Denise. Banks there just managing to hold the American back in second place as they head for the first bend. Banks in the lead. And it looks as though Denise has slipped back in the pack field at that first bend. He's in there somewhere as the pack heads up past the hay bales onto the upper loops high on the hillside.
Let's see what's on. There's Mark Banks coming down from the hill. I think it's start number 1 behind him on the Yamaha. I don't want to upset somebody, but we can't see it now directly from this
Well, our
direction.
Dutch commentator is right about Banks. Mark Banks there well in the lead. But he may have upset the Danish contingent here today because the rider in second place is in fact number 28, Kjell Hansen from Denmark on a Yamaha. Then it's Brian Withers, Mason Weir and Neil Thomas all on Hondas. Barry Johnson's Kawasaki and number 1, Jared Smith on a Yamaha. The rest of the field beginning to spread out now as they swing round Devil's Elbow and on through the Honda loops. On the other side of the lake now, it's Mark Banks pulling away from the pack as they head up past the hay bales once more. Banks now swinging round the top end of Three Sisters Hill and down to Devil's Elbow. Jared Smith pushing his machine hard now, trying for that bit extra he needs to get himself in there among the leaders. The track now turning into a mud bath as the weather breaks. A bit messy perhaps, but better than the choking dust we had to put up with earlier in the day. Mark Banks now still in the lead, and it's Mason Weir, number 9, in second place. And it looks like the American Paul Denise has pushed his way through into third. Carl Shaw on one of the few Kagivas here today, being pressed by Barry Johnson, number 5. And the yellow flag is out at the hay bales. This bum hole, the cause of more than a few upsets during the weekend, is now becoming positively treacherous. The riders who intend to stay in this race are slowing down now and picking their way through here on the inside. Now it's the other side of the hay bales, and it's Banks still there up in front, heading down from the cliff descent and on toward Three Sisters. Round the Devil's Elbow, Banks there, confidently swinging round the Honda loops. The Danish rider, Kjell Hansen, back in second place. We seem to have missed him on the last lap, but there he is with Mason Weir on the Honda in third position.
Yeah, there he is, for the knees.
Coming down from the top loops, and later on in this same race, it's Mark Banks, number 7, firmly in the driver's seat. The drizzle now just as firmly damping down the course here at Trentham. Mason Weir pushing his machine to the limit, doing all he can to close the gap. Banks still there, well ahead as he swings round and down into the next lap. Denise, the American, still holding back somewhere around 4th position. Down by the lake, Banks swinging round the bend and storming up past the hay bales. Mason Weir and Barry Johnson beginning to close the gap now. And here's the American, Paul Denise, in 4th place, up over the bumhole, with the rest of the field headed there by Jared Smith on the Yamaha. Mark Banks catching up now with the last riders in this race here at Three Sisters. And it's Denise. The American Paul Denise has taken 2 places away from the British boys Barry Johnson and Mason Weir. Here he is now in 2nd place, coming down from Three Sisters. Watch out, Banks, the American boy's making his move. Barry Johnson lying 4th. That's Carl Shaw on the Kagiva, pushing Johnson back into 5th as they wind their way round the Three Sisters hairpin. Past the finishing straight, and it's Banks with Denise coming up fast now. Banks is going to have a fight on his hands. The American has to win this race to gain the title, but Banks can't allow Denise to get in front of him. There are just 4 points between them, and a win by the American would mean a points tie, and that's something Banks can't afford to happen, because this, the last race, would decide the overall title. And Denise has done it. He's gone into the lead, and what a lead. Banks, though, is going to have to ride like he's never ridden before if he hopes to keep the American away from the title in this class. Down the cliff descent, and Banks is hanging in there. A punishing race, this. 9 grueling laps on a course that's now beginning to take its toll on riders and machines alike. Coming up to Pilgrim's Leap, it's Denise with Banks battling on, holding his distance from the American, as they swing round past the finishing straight and on into this, the next to the last lap. Barry Johnson now 3rd in this race. A race that's becoming almost too much for some of the crowd. Certainly too much for some of the machines. Tim Wheeler's KTM definitely out of the race there. Course commentator Dave Smith says it all as he follows the leaders down from the far side.
Weaving his way through. Number 46, Paul Denise.
And there he is, the American rider building up a commanding lead now over Mark Banks in 2nd place. He's really moving now. Up over Pilgrims, and the leaders are lapping some of the slower riders. An uneasy moment there for Denise as he squeezed up against the straw bales by Paul Pickering, number 12. But Denise has no intention of leaving the course just yet. Banks there desperately trying to close the gap. They're really flying now as they scream over the lakeside bumps, round the bend and up past the hay bales. The last lap, and it looks as though time is beginning to run out for Mark Banks in this race. He's battled on valiantly throughout this class, but the challenge from the American has just proved too much for him. The closing stage is now as Denise swings round Devil's Elbow. On through the loops. Up and over Pilgrim's Leap. And through into the finishing straight to take the checkered flag. A great disappointment for that great British rider, Mark Banks. Tied on points with the American, but that was the last race, and so Denise takes the title. In this, the senior expert class, and over 3 races, Denise came in first twice, but only managed a disappointing 4th in the other. Banks, much more consistent in his racing, took a 1st and 2 seconds, but this is how the points table looked at the end of the day. The British boys putting on an exceptionally good show in this class. And when all the points across all the classes had been totalled, these were the final top 3 positions. England came in first, thanks in particular to the fine efforts of Paul Malin, James Dobb and the brothers Mark and Justin Banks. The United States did astonishingly well, just 4 riders, and yet here they are in second place. And a worthy third thanks to their strong showing in the Inter-80, the Dutch team. The Atari Youth Division International Motocross 1983. Over 350 riders sharing one of the hottest summers for years, even when it started raining. In no time at all, the choking dust was turned into mud, giving spectators too a taste of the track. A weekend that took its toll on the crowds, the machines, and the riders themselves. A weekend when the Yanks rode into town. Hank Moree, Larry Ward, Paul Denise, and superstar of the weekend, Dick Ballora, winning all 3 of the senior class races, including this one. Coming up from the back of the field, he battled his way through with a demonstration of his unique stateside style. Watch him now as he moves up from 12th position until able to take the lead in typical Ballora fashion. But the American Team Green weren't to have it all their own way. Junior rider Hank Moree having difficulty keeping up with a field dominated by British rider Paul Malin. Paul, although happy to share a drink with Hank, had no intention of sharing the course with him as well. Indeed, the whole of the junior section was dominated by the 2 Kawasaki riders, Paul Malin and James Dobb, showing once and for all that they too can get a move on just like the big boys. A weekend when the Dutch team brought along their Teddy, and no doubt with his help put in a fine performance in the Inter-80 class. Not, however, without problems for star rider Rennie de Rood. This disagreement with Justin Banks putting him out of the running, allowing his teammates Hal van Heeswijk and Pedro Tractor to take the lead. Justin Banks, battling bravely on in 3rd position, consoled, no doubt, by his eventual 1st place overall in this class. No such consolation for brother Mark Banks. Despite an exhibition of first-class riding with all the usual Banks tenacity, he just could not shake off the American challenge from Team Green rider Paul Denise. Throughout their races, the 2 riders were within seconds of each other. Banks taking a 1st and 2 second places, and Denise taking 2 firsts and a 4th. With their points tied at 67, the irony struck home when Denise took the title in this class by winning the final race. No wonder Banks looked disappointed. But the weekend is best remembered for the many smiling faces of the riders. Best remembered for the 7 countries that came together and made friends. Certainly remembered by those who just came along to watch. Even by those who would have much preferred to have been taking part. Never mind, there's always next year.